I honestly wasn't expecting much when finally picking up Ender Lilies. I knew beforehand that it was a rather dark Metroidvania and that its narrative was inspired by games like Bloodborne or Salt and Sanctuary. Since I really like these games, especially Bloodborne, I had put Ender Lilies on my wishlist years ago and had ignored it ever since. For years, it remained on that list until finally the moment came when I had some time and I was in the mood for a good Metroidvania over the Easter holidays. It didn't take long for Ender Lilies to put me under its spell. From the very first moment, I was captivated by its world design and narrative. It was rather obvious from the start what games had an impact on the design of Ender Lilies. The game is really dark, thematically and otherwise, and the narrative is rather convoluted. You shouldn't expect a clear, straightforward plot here. In typical Souls fashion, you are thrown straight into the action and have to piece together the story bit by bit. Storytelling and world building heavily rely on item descriptions, comments from your companion, and cutscenes that are played after defeating a boss or at other key points in the game. I don't want to give too much away here, but I was very invested in the storyline and became quite emotionally involved. The story is nowhere near as philosophical, metaphysical, or downright nihilistic as in games like Bloodborne. There is beauty here, there is hope that transcends the horror. You could best describe the narrative as a kind of dark, mature fairy tale. If that's what you're in the mood for, you'll probably be very satisfied here. In terms of gameplay, Ender Lilies really surprised me, as the game has some interesting ideas that I have rarely or never seen in this form in other games of the genre. What struck me right from the start was that I didn't directly control the game's protagonist, Lily, in battles. Instead, I could choose from a range of guardians who had different abilities and attack patterns. The variety of these guardians is truly amazing. From the classic sword wielder to rather slow hammer attacks and magical ranged attacks, the game offers you a seemingly endless range of ways to approach combat. In addition, you can summon supporting guardians and thus create a very individual playstyle. This was super cool and kept me wanting to try out new combinations of abilities all the time. I have to say that by the end of the game, the sheer amount of different weapons that you can all upgrade individually was a bit much. I got to the point where I had assembled a couple of loadouts with different weapons and kept switching between those for different enemy encounters. I would still find new weapons, but I didn't really engage with them anymore since I had already invested lots of upgrade materials in my current sets. That's a bit of a shame. I just wish the game had front-loaded more weapons in the early hours of the game to motivate me to experiment more. Instead, the game still threw new stuff at me in the final hours, which I didn't really care about anymore, as I was already set in my ways. It was still nice to have such a high build variety though, and as bosses in this game can be quite tough at times, it was absolutely necessary to adapt my strategies from time to time in order to succeed. Combat itself feels really tight and rewarding. It's true that occasionally there are some wonky hitboxes to be found here and there. For me, that was never really a huge issue though. On the contrary, I thought that in general, hitboxes were pretty clearly defined and enemy attacks very precise. On top of that, I found that most enemy attacks were visibly telegraphed, giving me ample time to react and counterattack. The game definitely manages to create that typical FromSoft flow state during battle. The back and forth between you and your enemy, the experimentation of offensive versus defensive strategies, and the slow and methodical formulation of a tactic and how to deal with a tough enemy. It does take some getting used to, as you are controlling a guardian spirit rather than the protagonist herself, but once you've got the hang of it, it all feels pretty fluid and great, if you ask me. Besides combat, another strength of Ender Lilies is the exploration. I always felt motivated to search an area to discover all the items or other secrets throughout the entire game. What I really appreciated here was that the game directly shows you on the map whether there's still something to be found in a level or not. However, I do have a small point of criticism here. Unsurprisingly, it often occurred that I still had something to do in a level even after clearing it the first time. So, once I was done with the main route through a level, I checked the map to see if I had missed anything, which of course I always did. It was really neat to see what I had missed with just one glance at the map, but only in the smaller areas of the game did it actually help. As some areas are huge and I had no clue where exactly something was located, I sometimes spent ages walking through an area in search of the hidden item. This can be frustrating, especially in the later areas of the game, which are nothing short of monumental in size. A little indicator showing me more than the mere existence of a missed something really would have gone a long way here. Putting these minor frustrations aside, I can thoroughly recommend this game. The narrative is enticing, the world is beautifully designed, the exploration is fun, and the combat is challenging but never unfair. I have to admit that towards the end, some of the bosses tend to get a little over the top, and it felt like the devs wanted to artificially increase the difficulty for some reason, but I still never felt like an unfair challenge was presented here. And hey, if you die, there's no real punishment, no corpse walk or anything like that. What really hooked me was the cryptic yet somehow still coherent narrative, the dark fairy tale-like mood, and the quiet moments of reflection that Ender Lilies displays from time to time. If that sounds interesting to you at all, you should definitely check out this game. Thank you for your attention.